One of the things that I think sets Elden Ring apart from the other Souls games, and not in a way that takes away from any of the others, but simply shows the masterclass in crafting this world that Elden Ring is the rich detail and themes of this game that it decides to explore. Now, due to the size of the game alone, it's given us a golden opportunity to dive into the many secrets that this game has, and if you've been following the series that we've been doing here on the channel, then you would have seen just how vast, in terms of gameplay findings, lore discoveries, even real-life references for the things we see in the game. And so today I want to go over my personal 10 favorites that we've covered throughout the series, the ones that blew my mind, and we'll see if you agree with me. But as we get into this countdown today, if you enjoyed the discoveries that we've covered and want to see more, especially after we get the Elden Ring DLC, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, as that supports me more than you can imagine. But with that, let's get into number 10. When it comes to the lore of Elden Ring, one thing we don't have a total explanation for is why the Guidance of Grace behaves the way it does. Melina describes it as the flickering golden light that guides the Tarnished on their journey, but we really never know who directs it or where it comes from. The most likely candidate being behind it is Marika, however we never really know for sure. But one interesting detail about the Guidance of Grace that you may not have noticed is in the intro cutscene of the Godfrey fight. Whenever we walk through the fog gate and meet Godfrey face to face, as Morgoth's corpse dissipates, the Guidance of Grace that flows from his body points backwards, flowing from Godfrey towards us. This is the opposite of what would normally happen, but it makes a lot of sense. Also, for a reason we don't entirely know, Morgoth is able to channel the power of grace, using it to form apparitions and even weapons. So this reverse flow of the Guidance of Grace clearly shows that he wants Godfrey to strike us down, but opens up a whole can of worms of questions about the true nature of grace, and how someone like Morgoth, who isn't tarnished, and is defiled by the Omen curse, is able to have a power like that in the first place. But I just thought that detail was so cool because not a lot of people noticed it, and the more you think about it, especially given Godfrey's history with the Tarnished, the more ominous it gets. Because we know Godfrey lost his grace after he defeated his final worthy opponent, and perhaps him getting it back now signals that another worthy opponent has emerged in us. At number 9, we have my favorite type of secret and discovery to talk about, ones that tie the game with real life, giving us insight into the imagery used and the ideas behind designing things that we find in the game. And this one is the basis for the Elden Beast design. When you first encountered the Elden Beast, you were probably just as confused as me about what the heck we're even looking at when this thing emerged. But as for the lore of the Elden Beast, according to the Elden Star's item description, we know that it's a being that came from space on an asteroid, crashing into the lands between and becoming the Elden Ring, the vessel by which the Greater Will controls the happenings of the lands between. But there's actually a very interesting basis of why it looks like this cosmic space animal. That's because the Elden Beast design is actually the Laniakea supercluster, the vast collection of galaxies that includes the Milky Way. And so you can see how it would be a perfect design choice to convey a being that's supposed to be beyond our understanding, and a power that holds together the construction of the world. But that's not all. The morphology of the Elden Beast is a little bit different. It's clear with all these little wings protruding off of it, round with something singular at the top that I can only assume is an eye. But I believe this is because the Elden Beast is meant to be an amoeba, which also makes a lot of sense from a lore perspective. We know that the Elden Beast lives inside a host, in this case the joint form of Radagon and Marika, as the Elden Ring, which is a trait that amoebas share, often in a parasitic way. But that's a rabbit hole for another day. Now this next one is chock full of mystery, and I'm really not sure if this is a glitch or an intended feature, but when you go into somebody else's world as a phantom, you're able to see the spectral forms of NPCs in their world. Now normally they would appear the same as they do in the host world, however there's a few instances where this is not the case. I've been told that both Lanya and some of the Great Jars have different poses when viewing them in their spectral forms, but I haven't been able to verify that. However, the one that blew my mind was Goldmask. Goldmask's quest centers around him unraveling the vast calculus of the Golden Order, and his poses appear as clockwork the further he goes down the equation. But there's a point in his quest where he gets stumped, unable to figure out how to progress. That is, until you tell him the harsh truth that Radagon is Marika. But there's a pose that he makes that can only be seen if you go into a player's world who's at this point in his quest line. You can see Goldmask grasping his face like in a state of frenzy, and it's honestly pretty creepy. Now again, I haven't been able to uncover exactly why this happens, or if it's even an intended feature or not, but but it is a really cool secret nonetheless, and I would like confirmation on if those other characters have different poses in their spirit forms as well. For number 7, we're going to dive into a bit of cut content. And when it comes to Elden Ring's cut content, there is a ton. Several cut NPCs, many cut quest lines, but there's also a ton of cut dialogue for almost all of the major bosses in the game. And I'm going to show you my 2 favorites today. These were discovered by Sekiro Doobie and Stratic. Definitely go check out their channels for more. But the first one is cut intro dialogue to the Rykard fight, and take a listen.
Oh, shapers of gods, meddlers in fortune. I do not abide by your suffocating order. So must it be. Evelyn, show him the way. A fine sacrifice in the end. Let us do all the gods together and devour the gods with me.
And up next is some cut dialogue from Godric that I really thought was interesting and gives us a little more insight into his character. So take a listen to this.
One day we'll return together to our home, bathed in rays of gold. There is only one tree and only its branches that bathe in true rays of gold. Not the fool-omened king, nor the rank malformed twins. Oh, we are the golden ones, the true and rightful heirs.
These were super cool, and if you want to hear the full versions, definitely go check it out on their respective channels. Number 6 explores the lore behind Melina's tattoo. Even this far from release, we still don't actually know what it is. However, this is the best explanation I've seen and seems to be the common consensus and understanding that people are using now. Melina's tattoo doesn't actually match any of the iconography we can find in the game. However, what it does match, at least pretty closely, are the outlines of crow's talons. And while it's not one-to-one, this would make a lot of sense from a lore perspective. Wrinkles or facial marks on that area of the eye are commonly called crow's feet. And crows or Corvians across many mythologies around the world are commonly associated with death. Now, I don't have a lot of time in this video to go in depth on it, but Melina's story throughout the game heavily overlaps with the story of destined death, and the eye covered by that marking only opens if Melina is still alive and destined death is unleashed. At number 5, we're going to explore even more of Elden Ring's visual inspiration. Because so much of Elden Ring's design choices are ripped straight out of classical paintings, with its strongest basis being in Salvador Dali's work and Beksinski's. First of all, you probably wondered where they got the idea for Mikola being in his cocoon, and if you thought Berserk, well, you're probably right in a sense, but this is from Salvador Dali's painting called Geopolitica's Child Watching the Birth of the New Man. It's even got the same drop of blood coming out of the hand that we see in the intro to Mohg's fight. Now, when it comes to Beksinski paintings, we have a lot. The giant robed skeletons on the thrones can be traced back to him. The strange designs of the Oracle envoys can also find their roots here. This is probably where they got the inspiration for Godwin's distorted face too, as well as the Lake of Rot's strange color palette and theme of red mushrooms. Of course, there's lots of other visual inspiration to be found in paintings of the past, but these were by far my favorites. Coming in at number 4 is the discovery of the life cycle of the falling star beast and Estelle. All around the lens between in these massive craters that seem to be the result of meteors, we can find these gravitational rifts that, when approached, reveal the falling star beast that caused these damages. Well, people were quick to notice the morphology similarities between the falling star beasts and Estelle, natural born of the void, and they quickly discovered that there was an evolutionary line here. The falling star beast appear to be based on an antlion larva. Antlion larvae have massive mandibles like we see on here, and are known to cover themselves in sand. The falling star beast appears to be covered in rock. We can also find a full-grown falling star beast, which shares the same form as the base falling star beast except with a skeletal head growing out of its front. But like their real-world counterparts, they'll need to find a subterranean den to gestate in, and we can find an evolved form of these creatures hanging upside down in underground rivers shooting us with the rocks that once made up their cocoon. And of course we can find the final form, enhanced with the power of a stolen knight, Estelle, natural born of the void that happens to also resemble a full-grown antlion. There are some pretty cool elemental interactions in Elden Ring, such as fire burning enemies made of wood, and lightning conducting through the water, but another example of this is lightning conducting through metal. When fighting the abductor virgins, you might notice that the true creature that commands the vessels lies on the inside, and since they're coiling through a steel contraption, shocking them with lightning goes straight through to the inside. Faster than your eye can even process it, you can see the damage jump up from 322 to 422. Now personally, I haven't seen any other interactions where you get this kind of chip damage that registers so fast. But if this is the only one, this is such an insane attention to detail. Even when I have the video slowed down to 10%, it's still hard to see. But even if you don't care about the science side of it, zapping these guys with lightning makes the fight a whole lot easier. One of the coolest discoveries that was made in Elden Ring was that the Knights of the Great Jar, the 3 invader NPCs that you fight in front of the Great Jar in Caelid, were actually copies of players who had beaten the challenge before. This realization got people thinking. The Fia's Champion boss fight also has player model characters, so would it follow the same principle as the Great Jar fight? Well, turns out yes, it does. Surprisingly, every time you hug Fia, you're not only giving yourself a debuff, but you're also submitting your character to become one of the fighters in the Fia's Champion boss fight. And it also appears like every time you hug her consecutively, it overwrites that. This command was also found during the interaction when you enter Fia's dream to fight Fortisax, but what it seems like it's doing is saving your character models until you first reach Deeproot Depths, and then they are submitted into the pool. So I chose this one as number 2 because I think this is one of the coolest discoveries that adds that extra layer to the game of community and secrets that nobody's really gonna know on the surface. And it also makes a more lackluster boss fight a lot more interesting. Now for my number 1 absolute favorite discovery in Elden Ring that completely blew my mind when I heard about it was the deep connection of Elden Ring's imagery and themes to old Hermetic literature, specifically the Ripley Scroll. The Ripley Scroll is a metaphorical depiction of the formula to create the Philosopher's Stone, the device by which you could turn base metals into gold. And so much of the key things in Elden Ring can be found within this scroll. Like we talked about with the paintings earlier, this is almost definitely where they got the inspiration for much of the things we find in the game. The most prominent being this panel here. We see a great tree surrounded by towers, each representing an element and a member of a royal court, dividing houses of the sun and the moon with a red king and a white queen. The Elden Ring comparison would obviously be the Erd tree, surrounded by the divine towers, each representing a demigod, with a great rune or element of the Elden Ring, the sun and moon representing the joint between the Golden Order and the Carian family, with the red king being Radagon and the white queen being Marika. The Ripley Scroll also contains symbolism known as the Wheel, which matches the Eye of the Fire Giant. And the final image of the Ripley Scroll, the end of the formula to create the Philosopher's Stone, is eerily similar to the logo of the game. And considering the theme of Elden Ring is a tarnished going on a journey to become a Golden Lord, it makes way too much sense. Now, I've personally gone down the alchemy rabbit hole here on the channel. If you want to find that, I've made several videos about it. But to fully explore all of the alchemical themes in Elden Ring would take several hours, but this is just a tiny taste of the metaphors. But guys, those are my top 10 favorite discoveries that we've covered here on the channel in our Did You Know series. And if you want to check that series out, there are a ton more just like these. Now, personally, I have exhausted my list of all the secrets I had, but that doesn't mean the series is over. New ones are being uncovered nearly every day, and hopefully it won't be too long until I get an extensive list again, and we can keep the series going for as long as possible. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, as that does help the channel out in more ways than you can imagine. But with all that, I'll catch you in the next one.